afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What a fabulous couple of days it's been catching up with old friends and new ones here at Red Meat 2019. Last year I was at Red Meat 2018 in Canberra, but in a very different capacity. So working in the industry, I was interested to know what MLA was delivering, both for the business that I was leading at the time and the industry that I've invested my entire life in. But honestly, I was also a bit interested in what I might be getting myself in for if I was successful in becoming the managing director and the process that I was in at the time. So today, 8 months into the job, I want to share some of what MLA has been up to and share some of the common questions that I get asked while I've been travelling around. The week before I started at MLA, we all saw the outrageous footage of 100 animal activists invading the Lemon Tree feedlot. In the first week, the internet was flooded with the coordinated animal activist protests across Australia. Abattoirs were stormed and Melbourne's busiest intersection outside Flinders Street Station came to a standstill. With such public displays of activism against our industry, it's easy to think that our industry is under attack. This year, more than ever before. So naturally, the question I've been asked countless times is, what's MLA actually doing about this? Before I answer that, I'd like to reinforce a few of the facts for context we've already heard quite a bit about in the last couple of days. We've also heard about these things this morning, and while anti-meat extremism has recently spiked in the news headlines and the visibility of it significantly increased, 80% of that coverage has been favourable towards meat producers. We're seeing the general public also fed up with extreme animal activists. The public's joined the call for jail sentences and fines for farm invaders, and the public stood shoulder to shoulder with our industry, applauding when the trespass laws were passed to punish such outrageous actions. The fact is, red meat producers are trusted very much by consumers. Our research tells us that 61% of consumers feel that producers make a positive contribution towards society. Nearly 2/3 say that the industry's animal welfare practices are good or very good. The bottom line is that there's no evidence of any tidal wave of consumers turning to veganism. As we saw this morning, for the last 3 years, the number of urban Australians who identify as vegan or vegetarian has remained stable at 7%. And more than 3/4 of that 7% regard themselves as flexitarians, so someone who occasionally eats meat. The insights from our research confirms that by value, red meat remains the most popular protein with Australian consumers, with red meat and vegetables the most popular meal Australian households consume. For consumers, the main barriers to getting more beef on the table are price and health. It's true that red meat prices at the checkout are rising, but this is actually something we should be celebrating. After all, we're producing a high-quality, consistent product. Increasing the value of our product is what it's all about, especially when those returns filter back along the supply chain. Even though those prices are rising, consumers are seeing value in the beef they buy, with results from our recent Australian Beef the Greatest campaign showing that a growing number of consumers are willing to pay more for beef. On the health front, red meat is considered the most important protein source for iron and zinc. Our consumer research also indicates that Australians want variety and healthier meals. So, what are we doing about it? Quite a bit, actually, and the video you just saw comes off the Good Meat website, which is one of the things which I'll talk about in a second. And our focus is firstly to engage with the community, telling the story of how red meat's produced responsibly, and secondly, making the cost and health perception of red meat more palatable. Let me start with the Good Meat program. At the heart of Good Meat is a website for consumers and the community, proudly telling the story of the Australian red meat industry welfare, environment and health credentials. Those themes Howard touched on in his address this morning. MLA's paddock to plate virtual reality, or VR, is a great interactive tool which figuratively transports the user into and across the supply chain. It proudly shows how red meat's produced. The immersive 360-degree virtual reality experience has been viewed by more than 75,000 Australians at a range of festivals, shows, schools, markets and other activities around the country. You may have had a glimpse of this over the last few days, and particularly in the igloo that's out in the display area in the back. We already know that consumers trust producers, so who's better placed to tell the story of Australian red meat than actual producers themselves. We've worked with many producers like Michael and Michelle Lyon from this morning's session, providing them with the support and confidence to act as advocates for our industry. These producer advocates have gone on to tell their story at countless community events in schools or through the media. We've also shared the culinary delights of Chef Sam Burke over the last few days, and if there's a more enthusiastic person supporting our industry, we'd certainly like to meet them. One of the other things Sam and his friends at MLA do is partner with chefs and butchers, teaching them the value of secondary cuts, identifying red meat meal solutions that keep the cost down and, most importantly, keeps red meat on the menus of restaurants and corporate catering providers. As we know from our research, cost is a major barrier for consumers. So MLA demonstrates cost-effective options using non-primal cuts to suit food service and retail teams. In doing this, not only does MLA inform our retail and food service partners about red meat, but it indirectly extends the message to consumers. When chefs and butchers themselves start to tell consumers the good story of red meat and the value of secondary cuts. It's only just one way where we can really maximise the reach of our levy dollars, by going to the chefs and butchers and then out to the consumers through them and the way they promote the products that they develop. Our collaboration with the airline catering company Gate Gourmet demonstrates the impact of this sort of work. Last year, MLA worked with Gate Gourmet to showcase tasty and affordable alternative cuts like lamb shoulders, beef briskets and rump caps. As a direct result, there's now an additional number of red meat items on the menus, which includes a Moroccan lamb shank dish, which is now offered on selected flights across Australia, with more than 98,000 portions expected to be served annually. This uses an extra 15 tonnes of Australian lamb. This is on top of the 150 tonnes of Australian lamb and beef that's already used each year by Gate Gourmet and the airline industry. MLA is also working with the Qantas culinary team, responsible for serving 10 million meals a year. We're collaborating with Qantas and Neil Perry Consulting to demonstrate creative ways for more red meat to be served on board Qantas flights across all classes of travel. But we're not just talking about red meat to the skies, we're also been doing work on the water as well. We're working with P&O Cruises to get more red meat served on the increasingly popular holiday choice, which is cruises. We're fortunate to have corporate executive chef Uwe, responsible for all P&O Cruises, join us here at Red Meat this year, and he's been working with Sam over the last few days. Through this partnership, P&O have increased their use of red meat, and particularly secondary cuts. In a recent 3-day period, they served an additional 2.5 tonnes of red meat in the second-tier restaurants on board one of the cruises that Sam and Chef Uwe were on. And the interesting thing on that voyage was the feedback from the customers out of I think it's the pantry that restaurants referred to, outperformed the feedback from the customers that were eating in the celebrity chef restaurants on the same cruise. So this goes to also support the things that we know and have come out of the MSA program, where a good eating quality experience isn't necessarily restricted to a high value or what we would have perceived previously as a high quality cut. So if we can give people a good quality experience regardless of the type of cut, they will certainly think about it favourably, and this is one of the ways that we can add value to the whole carcass. MLA also works closely with health professionals, including dietitians and GPs, because when they provide advice, consumers sit up and take notice. The program, MLA's program, So What's for Dinner, reach to a quarter of Australian GPs, providing them with resources on how to encourage patients to eat a healthy diet, which includes recommended amounts of red meat. The Australian Beef Sustainability Framework is another way the industry communicates its commitment to sustainability and its significant progress in caring for natural resources, animals and people. The framework released its second report this year. Work's also now underway to develop a sheep sustainability framework to partner with the beef framework that's been in place for a couple of years. Another common question that I'm asked is around plant-based proteins, or alternative-based proteins, probably more accurately, and are they a threat to the Australian red meat industry? Like animal activism, Plant-based proteins have received a lot of airtime this year, and at first glance, it can seem that this protein will pose a major competition to our product. So again, let's look at some of the facts. Plant-based alternatives aren't new, but it seemed like in March and April this year, when we saw this massive increase in activism, that we woke up one morning and decided that all of a sudden there were vegans in the world, and all of a sudden that they were present, and all of a sudden they hated us, and all of a sudden MLA wasn't doing anything. Well, there's always been vegans, and they've always probably hated us, and we've actually been doing quite a bit about it. Problem is, we weren't sharing that more broadly. And also what's new is that these alternatives are now seeking to mimic the experiences of eating red meat. And it's in its taste, its smell and its appearance, but without the perceived animal welfare and perceived environmental impacts. So what's also new are the cell-based products that are grown in a lab rather than in a paddock. And there's no question that these new products and these new opportunities or develops are getting a disproportionate amount of airplay. But what we have to do is keep a very close watch on the alternatives to red meat, and more importantly on the reactions of consumers to these products. It's important to note that MLA's market research indicates there's a low consumer awareness of cultured and synthetic meats, and only a modest number would like to try these as products. Only 5% of Australians claim to eat plant-based proteins like tofu or others on a weekly basis. So again, according to ABS nutritional surveys, red meat is Australia's favourite protein. It's Australia's favourite protein source by value. Global megatrends indicate that health and well-being and a preference for natural quality foods from trusted sources are important to consumers. Coupled with this is the strong consumer interest in provenance and production. Marketeers of red meat can make claims their products are natural and minimally processed. Makers of lab-grown meat and plant-based proteins are going to have a much tougher job of meeting these requirements and demands of consumers. But to remain relevant in this competitive environment, we need to continue to focus on the consumer, understanding their concerns, desires and must-haves, and delivering on these in the best possible way that we can. That's why programs like Good Meat, the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework, and MLA's other work in telling the story about red meat production and its sustainability are not nice to haves, but they're must-haves. Over the past 3 years at MLA's red meat events, Richard's made big announcements during his AGM address. I must say, looking at some of the notes staff were making when there were things like, and we'll go again this year, it gave me a little bit of a nervous twitch. But I want to commend Richard on the legacy he left behind of being bold and ambitious. And I want to provide an update on where we're up to on the previous announcements. In 2016, he announced a plan to roll out an objective measurement technology called DEXA across AusMeat registered slaughter facilities. Had some bumps along the way. But since our announcement in 2016, MLA's installed DEXA units in several beef plants, several lamb plants across Australia, and we're lined up to do nearly that same number again in the next year or so in projects that are already approved and underway. The key reason for investing in this space is to ensure a smooth, transparent flow of meaningful carcass feedback to producers, which can then inform on-farm decisions. Some of the knock-on impacts have been the benefit that this also then provides to drive and increase the uptake or interest in things like robotics, so providing precision information on carcasses. So while this has been a good start, while it's been ambitious and while it's actually set some very ambitious targets, there's still a lot more work to be done in this area, and we're still very much committed to that project and to implementing it going forward. In 2017, MLA made the bold announcement that the country's red meat industry could be carbon neutral by 2030. With industry commitment, the right policy settings, and new investments in research, development and adoption. The carbon neutral 2030 target sets a path to turn today's pressures into tomorrow's opportunities for the Australian red meat industry. It sends a clear signal to government and consumers and customers that the red meat industry appreciates concerns around climate change and is proactively addressing emissions, which reinforces our reputation as global leaders in sustainable red meat production. We heard from Howard this morning that the CN30 initiative or project, I think his term was genuinely genius, because it connects us to consumers and it connects us with a significant consumer concern and demonstrates that we've heard and understood their concern and are prepared to take some action about that. CSIRO's research has shown it's possible to achieve this goal while maintaining animal numbers, combined with continued improvements to vegetation management, methods to reduce livestock methane emissions and improve carbon storage methods in soils. But let's be clear, our view on being carbon neutral is that it has to be in the context of improved profitability, intergenerational business sustainability, and leaving the environment in better shape than we found it. The red meat industry's already made big inroads in this area. Emissions have been reduced by over 57% since 2005. And the red meat industry and the manufacturing sector are the only major sectors in the Australian economy to reduce emissions since 1990, with the red meat industry making far greater reduction than manufacturing. So by all accounts, we've already made great progress, but more is still needed. To support this goal, MLA is investing in a number of areas to help industry to continue to reduce emissions and store carbon in the landscape. Some of these options can be acted on now, such as improving animal genetics and husbandry practices to reduce emissions per unit of meat production. Other options require further R&D to validate their environmental and economic benefits for industry. Our industry is paving the way to a carbon neutral future. As an industry, we shouldn't leave any stone unturned in the search for opportunities for industry transition to this goal. One of the challenges we have to manage, though, in this process is the discussion around opposition or support, and nearly blind opposition or support for making progress in this area. And so often it seems that we see demands for people to do something or to set a policy or somebody else to take some action. One of the things I think our industry can demonstrate with CN30 that we're much more interested in action and progress than we are in the argument. Last year we announced our partnership with the Australian Olympic Committee, and earlier this year we announced our partnership with Paralympics Australia. And for those people that were there last night, how awesome was Scott Reardon? To hear his story and to have somebody like that so enthusiastic about being an ambassador for our industry and to be able to share the context of his story in line with what he sees as so important and so aligned with what we do really does give us heart about the benefit of this type of relationship. The partnership will see MLA join forces with Australia's Olympic and Paralympics teams competing at Tokyo in 2020, showcasing the role of Australian beef in a healthy lifestyle. MLA's Olympic partnership provides a unique opportunity to reach an unprecedented audience about the role of Australian beef as part of a healthy and active lifestyle. Australians will start seeing the marketing campaign from early next year with a TV commercial that includes an athlete and naturally aligns Australian beef with greatness. We're also looking at other partnerships to further leverage your levy dollars to encourage consumers to eat beef as part of healthy eating and everyday meals. But our campaign won't stop there. As part of the partnership, Australian beef will be served at all official Australian Olympic Committee and Paralympic Australian events in Australia and Tokyo in the lead up to and during the Games. MLA has chosen several Olympian and Paralympian ambassadors to represent MLA and Australian beef leading up to and during the Games time. One of these activities is our virtual classroom program, where we offer primary school classes the opportunity to learn about Australian red meat. In term 2 next year, students from across Australia will engage with our Olympic and Paralympic ambassadors via live video stream, allowing students to see and hear their stories of greatness. And I reckon somebody like Scott from last night and his mates will have a massive impact on these kids. Our partnership with the Australian Olympic and Paralympics teams represents a big body of work, but also an unrivalled opportunity to remind consumers and customers and the community about Australian beef's role in a healthy diet, a busy lifestyle, and a constrained household budget. It'll reinforce why Australian beef is worth paying more for. This year marks a big one for our industry's planning and preparation. As the industry's research, development and marketing service provider, we'll continue to deliver our current strategic plan until June next year and our annual investment plan at the same time, and ensure that our investments deliver value. Seems like the red meat industry at the moment is review central. We've got the review of the MOU, we've got heightened interest in industry structures, and we've got the most recent announcement of the Minister for Agriculture into rural research and development corporations. As Michelle mentioned earlier, the Red Meat Advisory Council released Red Meat 2030 last month, which represents a 10-year plan on where the industry needs to head to remain sustainable, productive and profitable. The strategy presents a vision to double the value of Australian red meat sales as the trusted source of highest quality protein. There's no denying that the ambitious goal to double the value of red meat sales is creating a major shift in mindset at a board and senior management level at MLA. We know that as a service provider, delivering on the industry vision for 2030 will require change in the way that we operate, making decisions now for where our focus should and shouldn't be going forward. This is why today I want to share a couple of things to demonstrate how committed we are to support the industry delivering this goal of doubling the value of the industry sales as the trusted source of highest quality protein. Firstly is the work we've been undertaking with the board and senior leadership team in recent months. Since its inception in 1998, MLA's invested in around 10,000 projects, all for the benefit of levy payers and the red meat supply chain. However, I strongly believe that we can and we will deliver better against these, and we will deliver more than we have in the past. And I'm not alone. MLA has a proud legacy and is made up of a team of outstanding staff, each committed to delivering the very best they can for the benefit of the industry. I'm immensely proud of the dedicated team that I'm very fortunate to lead. We're absolutely committed to fostering the prosperity of the red meat industry, and we'll continue to look at new ways to achieve this. Some of the things we're going to do going forward is that we're going to make sure that we do fewer things, but we're going to do them bigger, and we're going to be much bolder about how we set our ambitions. We want fewer, bigger, bolder to become one of the guiding principles that we use in the way that we identify and manage and drive our R&D programs. And the reason for doing this, or the reason for taking this approach, is to ensure that what we do and how we do it will deliver real impact for our levy payers. We've got an opportunity to help the industry create unprecedented transformational change. This will be our driving force. MLA is privileged to be in a truly unique position. We work at every link of the red meat supply chain globally. We've got people, we've got insights, and we've got the capital to not only invest in the activities that create real benefit to our levy payers, but to operate in an entirely different way to amplify these investments to an extent that actually hasn't been seen or done before. It's not only what we do, but it's how we go about doing it. We're only in the early stages of putting these plans in place, but MLA's commitment is that every decision, every action, and every investment will be made to create unprecedented transformational change for the industry. It goes without saying that producers and the red meat supply chain will be at the heart of that consideration. Creating and capturing value to increase the return on the investments we make on your behalf, and capturing the value from that is the major driver behind how we think about our R&D and our programs going forward. So what will this look like? It's going to look like more initiatives like CN30 that truly change the prospects of the industry. Big goals, big programs, but also big benefits. But we can't deliver on this ambition on our own. Collaboration will be critical to meeting the goal of doubling the value of Australian red meat sales. Collaboration that perhaps hasn't always been as evident as it needs to be for us to collectively achieve the outcome. This means working together, being more united with our fellow red meat RDCs, the peak industry councils and the Red Meat Advisory Council. It also means working together across the industry with producers, feedlots, processors, wholesalers, butchers, chefs, retailers, exporters and importers. And it also means looking outside the red meat industry to other RDCs, researchers and marketing agencies, bringing together the best people and the resources that we can find. We need to put aside vested interests, show leadership, and all think of how we can individually and collectively contribute to the common good to double the value of red meat sales in the next 10 years. And our job starts today. But we know achieving this goal, especially given the challenges we face, won't be easy. So regardless of where we live, none of us have been able to avoid the lived experience or the vision of the challenges that have faced our whole industry in the last couple of years. Drought, floods, fires. Our national herd and flock numbers have been smashed, and the recovery on a national scale will be challenging, let alone being able to double the value of sales. There's limits to what MLA can do in challenging circumstances like we find ourselves. And believe me, we've certainly explored every option we can think of. As a service provider, much of the assistance we can provide or deliver revolves around information, practical tools, communications and support. But as part of the industry recovery, we're committed to ensure levy payers have no financial restriction to access all the products and services that are delivered by MLA direct to a levy payer. So what's that going to mean? Many of these products and services are commercial offerings. Many of these things we charge for, and we should. The things we develop with socialised funds are things that are going to provide benefit to the industry and to individuals that are commercial products. We absolutely should charge for them. There should be a path for commercialisation. And if we're successful in our ambitions of creating unprecedented transformational change, and there's going to be more tools in the coming months and years that'll be commercial offerings to the industry reflecting the value created from your investments. However, we're conscious of the current challenges facing the industry and the potential restrictions to our recovery. So I'm delighted to announce or to share with you that, get away from making an announcement, to share with you that on Monday at the board meeting, the MLA board meeting, we agreed to do everything in our power to fast-track the uptake of adoption of as many tools as possible that we deliver direct to levy payers to aid in the national recovery process. And the first component of this will be from Monday, so Monday next week, until the 30th of June 2021, MLA is going to temporarily waive all fees and charges related to any products and services that are delivered directly to an MLA levy payer. This will include things like LPA and NVDs, training and workshops, producer MSA activities, field days, updates, any of those programs, activities, products, services that we deliver that will be assisting individuals, levy payers, or their livestock in knowing more, understanding more, doing more, or being better. By temporarily removing these costs, our intention is to support levy payers directly and fast-track adoption by using everything in our collective and individual powers to drive the national recovery of the red meat industry. It's not the only measure, but it's the first step to show our commitment and support to the industry. Since starting in March, I've listened to many people across the industry. MLA actively engages and consults with producers and organisations across the whole country, and too often I've heard of the obstacles that restrict our ability to change. Many of these challenges are outside our collective control. However, there's also some that we can influence, and therefore we can overcome them. So by temporarily removing these costs that MLA can control, our hope is a shared commitment from industry to focus on what we can influence and both individually and collectively to support red meat levy payers. Success will require a concerted collective team effort. I've no doubt the red meat industry is up for the challenge. We are resilient. When we work together, we can achieve anything. MLA's already started down this path, and since the launch of RMAC's 10-year vision of doubling the value of sales, together with my management team, we've thrown ourselves into shaping our roadmap ahead, identifying fewer, bigger, bolder ways that we can support the industry. We're focused on not only what we do, but how we do it to create unprecedented transformational change. I look forward to working with you and building a sustainable, more profitable, more resilient industry. Thank you.